did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
I want to say another big good evening going out to each and everybody right across the globe tonight. It's another edition of Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. And tonight, alongside myself, you've got my guests, Sherilyn and Reggie Williams.
It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in.
Quite sure it's going to be a very engaging discussion indeed.
It was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
It's been a long week here in the UK with the elections just gone.
For my crime.
Sure, people across the world have been listening and tuning in and watching it on TV as it unfolded.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Still getting back after the repercussions of the recent terrorist attacks in Manchester and London.
Dealer sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply.
UK is a very uneasy place indeed.
That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb.
But tonight we go back on the trail of wrongful convictions, and we're looking specifically at the story of Jonathan Irons.
Than Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator.
So stand by and stay with me. And very shortly I'll be introducing my guests. Next week we'll have Mark Clements.
Already did my time.
And we'll be looking at the abolishment of the death penalty.
Already did my time. Paid for my crime.
And how it's affected our people over these generations. We are live. We're on World Jam Global Radio. My name is Kervin, Julien, and this is Issues Today.
I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands.
You know, we've done many shows over the last 2 or 3 years in particular.
Over the street.
From police brutality, unlawful killing,
nothing's changed.
Wrongful convictions, death penalty.
I'm a changed man.
But this particular story has got my attention.
Out being no gangster, life is too...
I don't think I've ever come across, especially since the Cardiff 3, or the Cardiff 5 as they're known, I don't think I've ever come across a case with so many conflicting issues that it was impossible to have found this man guilty, yet they did. We are going to hear some more about the circumstances surrounding this particular case. But I just want you to get on board with an open mind, as you always do.
I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than...
Not sure wherever you are, whatever you're doing, time to sit back and relax and...
Already did my time, paid for my crime.
Don't forget, you can also join me again tomorrow morning for the Wake Up Everybody Sunday Gospel Show. That's where we do church before church.
Going on right now.
8 a.m. UK time.
In prison.
bringing the gospel according to Dr. Feelgood. But tonight, my friends, without any further ado, I want to introduce you to my guests.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Trying to cope with this living hell.
And I'll allow them to tell you where they're from and what they're doing.
Already did my time.
First of all, I want to say a very big good evening going out to Mr. Reggie Williams. Hi there, Reggie.
Hey, Kervin, how are you doing?
We're not doing too bad at all, sir. It was a pleasure and an honor to meet your acquaintance and to have that conversation that we had as we began to connect in time, of course, to do this show. So I'm going to leave you an opportunity now to just introduce yourself to our audience and let them know a little bit about yourself, sir.
Just a little bit about myself. I actually live in the state of Missouri, which we call the Show Me State. I wasn't born and raised here. I was born an Army brat, so I actually got the opportunity to live all across the United States growing up. My dad is a retired light colonel in the U.S. Army, and so Missouri happened to be his home. We ended up coming back to his homeland, and I met my bride in Missouri, went to college in Missouri, and I work for a large insurance company right now.
Okay. Well, that's... I sold insurance many years ago. It was probably one of my first jobs when I left school. That's another story. But selling teaches you a lot of character and discipline, motivation and inspirational as well. Let's go strictly across to your beloved wife, the one that you've been betrothed to, and that's Sherilyn Williams. Good evening, or good afternoon, or good day, Sherilyn.
Good day, Kervin. I'm doing good. It's a nice day here in Missouri.
Okay, and tell our audience just a little bit about you.
Okay, as Reggie said, we live in Missouri, and we also live in the capital of Missouri. So, we are there where the Missouri State Penitentiary is, which was it's a historic landmark now. It's one of the oldest prisons west of the Mississippi, and so we're also there where the state capitol is, and so we feel like we're right there at the seat of justice. But I'm a graphic designer. And my father is a minister and a music teacher, and he'll come in to the story later. But we have 3 boys of our own, and then we have lots of extra kids that we've adopted into our family, including Jonathan.
Okay, so when you say adopted, what do you mean by do they live with you?
No, just extra kids that we care for and try to mentor.
Great, that's really sounds. And how long have you guys been doing that?
Oh, probably ever since we've been married, going on 31 years.
So that's one huge family you've inherited, and I take it.
Right.
You know, when you guys got together, right? Were you both similarly minded anyway? Were you guys that were kind of supporting people outside before you even got together, or is that just something that came when you guys got together?
Well, I can talk for myself. I've always mentored. I'm in a fraternity, and I always, had the mindset to reach back and community service. And we even got a program right now in our fraternity where we're reaching back to some of the younger generation and just teaching them some life skills and getting them more prepared for whatever their endeavors are in the future, whether it's college or vocational or however it is. So I've always done stuff like that. So
that's actually amazing work, and I've kind of worked in ministry myself for many years, and I'm just about to start a new project, mentoring some vulnerable kids now with autism and various other sort of stuff, and I'm pretty excited. So we have a shared passion. And it's a powerful tool to have when you have the gift of giving. Mm-hmm. So without no further ado, let's really get to some of the heart of the matter, because the case that we're looking at today is a case of a young man by the name of Jonathan Irons. And how did you guys get to meet Jonathan? Maybe Sherilyn, you might want to start off that story.
Okay, well, my father, as I said, he's a music teacher and he's a minister, and he has been a volunteer with the prisons there, the state prison and Algoa Correctional Facility for probably 40 some years. And he goes in and works with the choir and teaches them gospel songs, and also on alternate Sundays he may give a sermon. But he's gotten to know a lot of young men over the years, and so he met Jonathan when he was about 19, and Jonathan was a member of the choir. And my dad, he noticed that Jonathan was very astute at picking up on music theory and learning vocal music, and so my dad took a particular liking to him. And at one point, Jonathan came to him and said, I don't know my father, and I would like to adopt you to be my dad. And my dad said, he thought about it, and he's like, well, sure, I don't mind. And so they had a real special connection there, and then later he became his spiritual advisor. And Jonathan wrote him a letter that I got a chance to read, and I thought that by reading the letter, I was really impressed that he seemed like a really nice young man. I thought I'll just write to him and encourage him. And so I did that, and then we kind of wrote back and forth. And then at some point, he asked if Reggie and I would come and meet him. And I can be honest, I had some reservations about going to the prison, although Reggie had been there and done some ministry work and some plays, some drama work with the inmates, and he went for Toastmasters meetings. But I had not been, and so I had reservations, and I prayed about it, and God's answer to me was, don't be afraid to be a blessing. And so we went and we met him, and everything snowballed from there.
Do you know, before I was saved, I visited Her Majesty's Pleasure, as we call it over here in the UK, on several occasions. And the letters that I would write home to my mum when I was incarcerated would be real sorrowful, pitiful, I'll never do it again, mama kind of letters. And I quite quickly forgot, once I was released, all of those promises that I kind of made when I was in there. And I would imagine the letters that Jonathan was writing, some might think to themselves, well, hang on a minute, he's going to write nice letters. He's in a not nice place. And so you were touched by his letters. But when you met him for the first time, did how he come across and how he conducted himself, did that kind of measure up with the letters that you were receiving from him? Did that reinforce your feelings that he was a good man or a good person?
Well, I can tell you when we went, and I had been in the prison, never in the visiting room, but I had been in the prison before, like my wife said, just doing some ministry work. I prayed because I didn't know this young man only by, a few letters that I'd read. So I prayed and I just said, God, whatever happens, just show me who this person is the way you created him, because, and when he came in, I had a peace about the whole situation, and he did. He came in, he seemed very like a confident young man, and when we sat down, there was kind of like an immediate connection. So I was definitely open to listen to him, and we had actually a really great visit that first time. So,
and then kind of what then, because to connect there has to be some sort of an attraction is the wrong word, but there is a connection that people make that gives them the feeling that they want to continue pursuing this relationship. What was it about Jonathan that made you want to continue pursuing that relationship?
Well, I had a natural curiosity, as to, because I from my father-in-law, I did know that he went in at 16, which just blew my mind because I didn't know too many people at that age that went into a maximum facility, correctional facility. So I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about, him as a person and, how did this happen? And so, he kind of started telling me some things, about his case. And, I mentally took notes in my head. One of the things he had that stood out to me tremendously is he was not in there for a murder. It was for a burglary and
a non-fatal shooting, right?
non-fatal shooting. Yeah.
Okay. I want to get into the case a little bit later on, but before we do, I just want to find out a little bit more about Jonathan and what you got to find out about Jonathan, especially early on in those days when you and Sherilyn first started to go and visit. So as you started to relationship with Jonathan, what started to come out about for his childhood, for example? What was his childhood like?
I'll answer that in just a second, but as to your last question, I just wanted to add to what Reggie said, that our relationship with Jonathan really came about as totally as a God thing, because on a really personal note, I had lost my brother closest to me. He passed with cancer, and I really doted on him and loved spending time spoiling him, and it was a huge loss for me, and I was really suffering through that. And when God brought us together with Jonathan, God used Jonathan and I to do a healing simultaneously in both of us, because Jonathan desperately needed someone to care for him and nurture him, and I really needed someone to care about in the way that I did for my brother. And so God really had a plan in the whole thing.
That's amazing. Now let's just move on to the second part of the question that I did ask. What did you find out about his childhood as those early meetings in relationship building started to take place? Tell us a little bit about Jonathan, the boy.
Okay. The St. Louis area, and he grew up mostly in the suburb of St. Louis it's called Wentzville. It's a small suburb, and he was raised by an elderly aunt who was also caring for other children in the extended family, and under very difficult circumstances because, first and foremost, poverty. So they just had, a tough time, an elderly woman trying to care for nieces and nephews that, weren't her children, but she had a heart for it, and she did as much as she could. But as you can imagine, with a young man and just going it on your own as a woman, it can be rather hard when there's so many negative influences that can affect a young man, especially a black male. But in school, as far as school, teachers recognized early on that Jonathan was a very bright student, but toward about ninth grade, he dropped out of school just for various reasons, lost interest, and school was tough for him because he was poor and other kids made fun of him, and he never had, the necessary things that, make you feel confident as a kid. And so he dropped out in ninth grade. And the incident that he was convicted of occurred when Jonathan was only 16, and he was held in the county jail for over a year and went to trial when he was 18, which made it easier for them to give him a stronger sentence.
Okay, going back to when he was a boy and he was being raised by his aunt. Once you'd met him, have you gone on to meet his aunt?
She unfortunately passed away after he was in prison.
So
yeah,
go on. Sorry.
Part of the reason why my father-in-law reached out to us is I think she had just passed and he was going through a tough time. He wasn't able to go and attend the funeral, and this is the person that had been the stable adult in his life from the time he was born. And so that was one of the reasons why my father-in-law asked us to, write and to reach out to him. So
it said here in his bio that he never knew his father. Does that mean that he's never known his father? He doesn't know who his father is, or he's just never a relationship with him?
He's never known who his father is. I don't know the specific circumstances with his mom, but she was getting some medical help and she ended up getting pregnant, and that is how he was conceived. And the father is not somebody I don't think that she had they were not in a relationship together. And maybe they were, but it wasn't, like they were married or they were dating or something like that. So.
Is his mother still in the picture? Does he know where he is? Did they have any contact or communication?
His mother is alive, and we have actually met her, but she did not raise him. She had a lot of she had situations, and she still has situations that she's working through herself. So she was not in his life either. So it was his great aunt, which he calls Granny, which he considers his grandmother, that was the one that raised him. So from an infant on up until he went to prison.
So I guess from when we can start establishing this upbringing, there's a lot of gaps, a lot of holes to be filled, a lot of relationships that didn't really quite get made, that should have been made. And so you've got a young man who is lost to himself, I suppose, at times, and when he's in school, he's schooling with individuals that probably are tormenting him. Because their lives appear to be a bit more stable than his, and that would have been difficult for him, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
total good analogy. So.
Okay, so now this young boy who's been cared for his aunt. Just one more thing before we start, and I'm delaying going into the story for a reason, because I'm really trying to just build up a picture of who this guy is, humanize him in a way that we can get an understanding of, almost like we could touch him, like we knew him, So just before this time of incarceration, etc. You said that he dropped out of school at 9th grade. Did he start to get into any kind of trouble at all?
Yes, of course. Being in a big city environment, I mean, there's lots of enticing, things to distract young people, and a lot of pressure to get involved in trouble in the streets. So yeah, he did.
Let me make myself clear here. Up until the time I found the Lord in 2005, I was looking at 14 years in prison. Up until that time, I'd spent 30 years going in and out of courthouses and in and out of jails. My first conviction was in 1975, and my last was in 2005. And if anybody knows that people can change, and if anybody can understand those kind of circumstances, what make people tick, you're looking at him. I found God, and I turned my life around. So I don't judge. I don't sit in judgment in anybody. Any question that I might ask you is not even to paint a negative picture. It's to actually paint a more positive one. Because for me, I've already looked through some of the paperwork that I've got, and I see a young man who was in need of love. That's what I see. I see a young man who was in need of love, and probably found it in the wrong places.
Right.
So what I'm trying to get at is, was he known to the police? Because for me, young men get targeted by the police, even when whether they got a chip on their shoulder or not, because of the troubled lives that they're living. They have sometimes, and it's not altogether a bad attitude. It's a defensive attitude. They're cautious and they're aware of people approaching. And especially out there in the stateside, St. Louis and places like that, they would have been aware and conscious of how the police react and respond to them, in any circumstance. So was he known to the police? Had he been committing any types of crime where the police would have had a reason to have spotted him or even looked at him for any reason whatsoever? Or was he, you know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I can tell you his family was known. He had uncles that were probably in and out of incarceration, and they had a lot of influence on him. And so I know even from a transcript that, the one police that lived in Winchville said he knew the family, and he knew the family well. And so, yeah, he would have been known too, because he was related to them. And they did have a lot of influence on him when he was young, getting him to hustle and stuff like that. So, yeah, so I would say yes.
Yeah, so he saw behaviors. You see, again, Reggie, you've worked in supporting and mentoring people, so you will understand the terminology that I'm about to use. A behavior that's taken a time to learn is going to take a time to unlearn. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so he's growing up with learned behaviors, stuff that he's witnessing. All right, and that's what most of our street kids do. They grow up with learnt behaviors, stuff that they witness amongst their family or associates of their family. And then they go out and they act that out on the streets, or they act that out in the playground, never really fully aware of the consequences of those behaviors or the attachments that go with them. So now you've got this young boy who's coming from this problem background. He's got a dad that he never knows. He's never known. He's got a mother that is almost really in a sense emotionally abandoning him. He's got an aunt that's stepping in, and as much as he appreciates that love, that will still never replace the love of his mother. That's going to be a yearning inside of him, whether or not he understands it or not. You know. And so now he's going into school, and there are people that are calling names and making comments. And because the work that this woman's got to do with not just him, but with everybody else that she's trying to support, maybe he doesn't get all what he could get if he was just a child alone living with a mum and a dad, right?
Right. And she was elderly, too. She was in her 60s when she started raising him. So
that would have been difficult for her, too, because he's a young boy, right? With an operative mind.
And like Reggie said, the male influences that he did have, unfortunately, were influencing and teaching him to get involved in things that were not at all in his best interest. And but you follow, you look up to those that you have, whether they're as a child, you want that love, you want guidance, and whether they're steering you in a good way or bad way, you as a kid, you just want that attention. So.
I mean, gang culture and that kind of capacity was a very big stateside, much bigger stateside than it ever was here in the UK. But yet, at the same time, we have a total understanding of how people yearn to belong to something when they feel like they're missing out. So we're getting a picture here of a young man who's probably troubled, a bit confused, trying to attach himself to something, wanting to belong, and ready to attach himself to anything to belong. And unfortunately, it's the negative forces that envelop him. So now he's dropped out of school in the 9th grade. What was it that he started to do as he dropped out? Was he juggling, dealing, running the streets?
Probably all of that.
All of the above.
Right.
Okay. So let's try, because I know we haven't got long with you, Sherilyn. So let's just get to what actually happened. We're going to go into the case intact later on, but what actually happened? I mean, how did he come to get arrested?
Well, there was a burglary and a shooting in an area where Jonathan was visiting some friends. He was several blocks away trying to visit some friends and hang out with them. But a homeowner, the victim was a homeowner who came home from work and needed to quickly come in and change clothes, and he was going to go get a haircut. And he came in and heard a click in his bedroom, and what ended up happening, there was someone hiding in the closet in his bedroom. And I'll let Reggie tell more of the details, but an important note is that this happened in January of 1997, but in December of 1996, the victim's home was burglarized in that December as well. Right. And so this was the second burglary within 2 months.
Which within 3 weeks, actually.
Right.
Actually, within 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So already, if you was really on your game, you'd have been thinking it was somebody coming back probably for something that thought that they left behind or they could have had the first time.
Right.
Okay. So now, where was Reggie? Where was he when he was actually arrested?
Jonathan was.
Jonathan.
He was arrested like several weeks afterwards in a whole nother town. So, okay. But his name came up because when they were canvassing the neighborhood, they talked to some of his friends, and his friends said, they mentioned, his name, and of course, they had known who the Irons family was, and so, they made an immediate connection that who he was after his name was mentioned, that he was in the neighborhood. But he frequented that neighborhood a lot. He had friends there. They were all around the same age, 15, 16, and they liked to party, all of them. So
Okay, but it's what kids that age do, right?
exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what kids that age do. So he was arrested in a whole other town. What was he doing in in that other town? Had he gone there for a purpose?
Yeah, he did. He was up there, and I guess he was making his living.
Okay, so
That
okay,
way.
and how long had he been in this other town?
Now that part I don't know. I don't know if because it's about 30 to 40 miles away from where he grew up. I know he was with another person at the time when they put him out as a person of interest, and so they and the highway patrol went up there. He thought they were coming to get him for what he was doing at the time, and so him and the other guy left the house and ran, and then that's how he got arrested. So.
Okay, now Sherilyn, tell me a bit more about what you guys know, right, of why they feel Jonathan was responsible for this.
I think it was, yeah, I think it was mostly just a case of wanting to solve a crime, and you have a kid who's in trouble, and you've got him in custody, and let's go with it. It wasn't because none of the physical evidence matched him. It was just more of they picked him up, and he was in the neighborhood, and so you know it's easy. He didn't have anybody to defend him, and they took him in and questioned him with no attorney present, even though Jonathan was intelligent enough to ask for an attorney. They did not get him one, and his great aunt was not there, and they didn't call her. I mean, he's only 16 years old, and Reggie and I have 3 sons of our own, and it just scares you to think that your kid can be picked up off the street and you know nothing about it, and then they're never released again. I mean, put in jail, sent to prison, and there nothing that you could do about it because weren't even made aware. I mean, he was only 16.
Here's the thing. I want to go into some of the statement of facts in a while, but 50 years for a non-fatal shooting is an excessive sentence, to say the least.
Yes.
Right.
And actually, it was 65 years. Except in Missouri, you can run sentences concurrent. So he got 25, 25, and 15. And then they ran the 15, the burglary, concurrent with the other 2 charges that they put against him. So it ended up being 50 years, but but if you really put the sentence down on paper, it's 65 years. So that was extremely excessive. And that was one of the things that stood out to me when he told me that. I was like, I couldn't believe that somebody got a sentence like that.
It's highly unusual that somebody gets a sentence as high as that for a non-fatal shooting. But let me just put the non-fatal shooting to a side for 1 second, because this was a burglary first and foremost,
Right.
and a shooting took place because the guy came home. So was anything taken from the property? Was anything reported as missing from the property from the burglary?
No, not from that incident. So, and the interesting thing, it was a back and forth gun battle is what eventually happened, because the person went in, and when he heard the click, he went and pulled his 9mm out from his side table. He put a clip in it, and then there was an exchange of words from what he said in his testimony, and then at some point they both shot at each other. That's
Okay, so we're painting a picture now, and I'm doing this deliberately because I like to do this. This is investigative journalism as is best. Right, watch this. So if there's been the click, he's heard the sound, he's gone to his drawer, he's got the gun, he's come out, there's been an exchange of words. So at some point they must have faced each other.
well, that's the most interesting part, because when they asked him on the 911 call after incident was over with, could he identify the person? He couldn't give any descripting things about the individual.
No, I hear that, but
Yeah.
for me, if you had had that scenario, you'd have expected there'd have been some visual contact. A, while they exchanged words, and B, while they exchanged fire. There would have been some visual contact.
Exactly. If it happened the way he said it happened.
Okay, so that's issue number one for me, right? But yet, having had this visual contact, having had this exchange of words, I can't understand why, looking at the way that these pictures have been put together, why certain pictures had to be expanded larger for clearer identification.
Yeah, they used a photo lineup that was didn't follow procedure or rules at all, and in fact, Jonathan's picture is blown up many pixels larger than the other 5 pictures on the page. And Jonathan's picture is, if you think of 6 squares in a row, 2 rows, 1, 2, 3. Jonathan is number 3, and we read from left to right. Jonathan's number 3 at the top, and so and his picture is the biggest on the page, so it's definitely misleading, and it's going to attract your attention.
Listen, here's the thing: without reading that, right? Before I read it, when I printed it off, the first thing that I did was I looked at number 3 because it was the largest picture on the page.
Right.
And so it's natural. You put that in front of somebody, and the first thing that's going to attract them is picture number 3.
Right.
So that is an unfair advantage or an unfair disadvantage on his behalf. Was that ever picked out or raised during his trial?
The whole identification became the kind of the central point of the trial in the beginning. So it was definitely raised.
I just can't see why it wasn't pursued.
I think his testimony when they first showed him.
You guys, I'm losing you. I'm kind of losing your signal at the minute.
That I read. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead. Hello. Hello.
Okay. When they first asked him, could he identify? Are you still losing me too?
Your signal is still breaking up at this minute.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay,
I can hear you fine.
Okay, then go ahead. You carry on.
When they first asked him, could he identify him? But that right there should have been front and center. When somebody has to guess, then they don't really know. Number 3, which was the largest picture, that's going to be your natural, and that's his guess.
All right. If you can hear me clearly, I'm going to yeah. Guys, I'm going to drop the call. I'm going to call you straight back. Okay, bear with me, because I've lost. I can hear me clearly, and I can't hear you at all at the minute, and I'm not sure if you're coming through. Can you hear me? I'm going to drop it, and I'm going to come straight back to you. Okay.
Okay, because I can hear you.
Okay, no, don't worry. I'm going to drop the call, and I will call you straight back, and hopefully we should have a clearer signal, because I don't want to miss any of this, and I know Cheryl's due to go very shortly, so stand by.
Okay.
Thank you very much, guys. I just want you to bear with us as we do this again. Hopefully we should have a clearer signal this time. Do not worry yourself. This is what we do here on World Jam Global Radio. It's their signal. Come on, I'm ringing. And it's not answering. Okay, I take it. I got you guys now.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely. Okay, let's go again, shall we? That took a long time to answer. Your signal, your end is a bit low.
Yeah, you have me actually.
Well, I don't know.
Sherilyn had to leave, so you just got me.
Okay. Sorry about that. Right, let's go with where we were. Where were we then?
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
That's okay.
No.
Oh, we were talking about. Still can't hear me.
I can hear you intermittently. Hello? Yeah, I can hear you now, but somewhere you keep drifting, and I'm not sure why that is.
Some latency in the signal, but I can hear you fine.
Great stuff. Well, I can hear you clearly now, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. So we were talking about the photo lineup and just the suggestive nature of how they got him to pick 3 and 6. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. But again, it's really intermittent. Okay. Keep talking for me, please, Reggie.
Okay, all right. So I think that was like a critical point in the whole suggestive identification. And then the only other time that the gentleman got a chance to see Jonathan was at a preliminary hearing, but he was the only one that was African American in the room, and he identified him again at that point too. And the other thing is to be aware of is there were a lot of print articles in the paper about this case. And by the time of the preliminary hearing, they had actually identified his name and, where he was from. So at that point, anybody, including a potential juror, would have known, his name at that point too. So
we had something very similar here in the UK. As I told you when we were talking, I was chairman of the Cardiff 5 campaign. And what they did was, after they arrested these 5 guys, pulling them out of a group of 3,000, they took them 40 miles away and tried them in a very racist town that had no black peers on the jury. They had very little ethnicity as far as awareness of culture was concerned. And these guys, what actually happened on that particular case was that the local press printed once a day in the afternoon, and what they did was they put the prosecution on every morning and went to press as soon as the prosecution finished, and never input anything of the defense's rebuttal. So the jury would go away, and all they'd be reading in the papers every night before they came back to court the next day was what the prosecution had laid down as their case the previous day. Finding these guys guilty when they were innocent was a very easy thing for them to do. Which was atrocious. It took us 4 years to overturn that. But I could imagine how that prejudices the minds of a jury when they're given information beforehand that leads them to the guy that the police want to frame for the crime.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead, John, Reggie.
He had similar. I mean, I like the way you framed that, because he had similar where. The first article Jonathan had told me about when I met him, that they had put $1 million bond, and back in $1 million is a lot to me now, but even back in 1997, that was an extreme amount of money. And I watch a lot of crime stuff, but I had never heard of somebody getting $1 million bond unless they had murdered somebody or murdered multiple people.
Yeah, multiple murders.
Yeah, and so that was key. And when I went on the internet and I found the article that mentioned that, I thought, wow, I'm pretty sure the people who read that thought this guy must be just horrible to have $1 million bond put on him to be able to be released. So that was kind of the start of it for me, that I was like, something is really wrong with this case. And then the more I dug, the more I found out.
So when we talk about identifying Jonathan, right, the fact that while he was in hospital, he was unable to give a real description or any particular features that might represent his perpetrator. A long while afterwards, he was able to give a real detailed description of Jonathan.
Yes, all the way down to his Converse tennis shoes.
And I can't understand how that kind of evidence or testimony would be allowed or go on unchallenged, based on the fact that surely it's scientifically and medically understood that your memory fades with time. Hey, are you there, Reggie?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how the judicial system. I can hear you fine. I can
Okay.
fine.
Go ahead.
I can even hear background. So yeah. I don't know how the judicial system is in the UK, but I know here when you don't have any money, you're appointed an attorney from the state, and so and that person probably has multiple cases that they're trying to shuffle, and they're trying to defend you at the same time. So a lot of things can kind of fall through the cracks when you don't have, good representation, and you're fighting a system that's against you. So, a prosecutor in the United States has the full investigative group of the police that arrest in order to, build a great case, or even fight some of the issues that you're even talking about that go on in a case. So
the thing is, prosecutorial misconduct in America has been rife for years, and going back into those days, 80s, 90s in particular, it was even worse, right? So what you're really talking about is you're talking about the prosecution have already decided that this guy is guilty before he's even appointed an attorney, right?
Right.
So they're not looking to get him off this charge. They're not looking to get him off. They're not looking to get him found not guilty. They're looking to just get this dealt with as quickly as possible.
Correct. I mean, and you can tell just from the facts, and if you take a deep facts, you made their decision. Back against that decision, no matter how the evidence came back later on before the trial, because they thought they had him. There was some blood on his jacket, so they thought, "Oh, we'll run DNA. It's going to match the victim."
Okay.
We've got him that were lifted at the scene, and when they matched him, tried to match him to Jonathan, they didn't. He was there, but yet they had already in the paper after the preliminary hearing, one of the police officers was quoted as saying that he broke down and cried and he confessed to the crime, but that was never even in the trial because that his blatant statement to the public through the press was thrown out, and he wasn't even allowed to testify at trial because number one, he didn't Mirandarize Jonathan when he spoke to him. He didn't videotape anything, and so there was really no record of him saying any of that, but yet that was already put out in the public through the paper.
So people are already believing that he's guilty even before he's had a chance to defend himself. The fact that there was no fingerprints or no footprints and no DNA evidence was collected that belonged to Jonathan, can I ask the question? Was fingerprints, footprints, and DNA found at the premises?
Yes, fingerprints were found. There was a footprint found by the back of the fence from the house into the woods. Like I said, on the jacket that Jonathan had, they found some blood on the jacket when he was arrested. They did test it for DNA, and it came back negative to the victim and negative to Jonathan.
So you've got no.
So they don't know whose.
You've got.
It could have been
anybody's.
Yeah.
Right. It could have been cut shaving.
Right, exactly. A friend's coat, who knows whose coat that was. So.
But they found no fingerprints, no footprints, no DNA, no saliva, no hair, nothing that could put Jonathan at the scene of the crime.
No, so the only thing that put him there was the eyewitness testimony of the victim. So.
And that's the victim who could not identify him or give any particular characteristics to describe him straight after he had the encounter with him.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So he was also interrogated without a guardian at the age of 16.
That is correct.
So all of that evidence should have been thrown out, right?
I believe it should have been, definitely. Now, it wasn't. The testimony of the guy who was quoted in the paper, that was thrown out before the trial ever came. But to me, the damage was already done when that was allowed to be said in the paper unchecked. The trial hadn't even the trial didn't come up until, months and months and months later, but yet he was allowed to say that. And other people, even an assistant prosecutor was allowed to make statements about Jonathan without him giving his fair day in the court. So, people could make up their mind easily just by reading those articles. So
let me ask you a question. Let me just stray away from some of the facts just for a minute. Based on what you know, based on what you've read, based on the relationship that you've built with Jonathan, how has all of this affected you?
Especially having, my wife told us that we have 3 boys. It started a fire in me that, that just kind of like what we're doing right now is we have to speak about the injustices that are going on, and we have to make sure, just as human beings in public, because the law was meant to protect us, not to put us away or not to be used in a way that takes away the liberties that the law was supposed to give us. And I've learned a lot about the judicial system. I've learned a lot about prosecutorial misconduct. And I think, most of us just go about our day to day, just trying to raise our families and put food on the table. And until you have something like this affect you personally, you don't know that it's that much of a problem. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. Just going back to the facts again, according to here also, no one had permission to be in a residence on the day of the crime. However, after an investigation initiated by Jonathan's advocates, they learned that the police failed to disclose that they had found physical evidence of an unidentified person located at the only exit point of the crime scene. So they found this physical evidence. Is that the footprint that you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There's a footprint. Okay, I'm good. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, is this footprint a different size footprint to Jonathan's?
I think they concluded that there wasn't enough of the footprint to be able to make a positive ID of who it belonged to. But it was interesting. They did bring the dogs, but then they never said anything else in the trial about that footprint.
Because the thing is, I'm fully aware. Maybe I watch too much TV, but they're normally able to ascertain a rough foot size and the weight of an individual by the impression it gives in the ground, right?
Yeah, and it was snowing at the time, so it was in winter when this incident happened. So the footprint was in the snow. So I don't know if the conditions of the snow made it harder for them to be able to ascertain, what was the size or whatever. But the thing that stood out to me is that the direction that it was going in was a fence that went out to the woods. Jonathan was seen 2 blocks in the total other direction by some friends of him at around about the time that the incident was happening. And I'll give you the time frame. The guy testified on multiple occasions that he came home at 6:30. He called the 911 to help him out at 6:42. So you got a 12-minute time span. He was seen 2 blocks away in a whole opposite direction, at around 6:25 and 6:40. So you can't be two places at the same time. And one of the issues that he had with his lawyer is why didn't they bring up an alibi? But for whatever reason, they didn't. And so you got witnesses that saw him at a whole nother area of that neighborhood when that incident would have been taking place.
Did those witnesses give any evidence? Did they make a statement?
They made statements to the police, and they made statements to the public defender's investigator, but only certain people were picked to be at the trial. And it was amazing to me that the public defender didn't bring in some of those other witnesses. Now, they were all subpoenaed, but they weren't actually brought into the trial. Now, I have talked to two of them personally myself since then and heard their accounts, because they're a lot older now. They were very young. They were like, he was 16, and some of them were 15 and 14, and some of them were 16. So they were all around the same age.
Okay, so these are young kids that have just been playing, right?
Yeah.
So so back in then he was 16 at the time. What would he been doing? Basketball, soccer? What would he have been doing?
He played football when he was in school before he dropped out. So, and he had a keen interest in girls. So I think that was one of the reasons why he was in the neighborhood. Because the two ladies that gave the testimony said he came to the house multiple times, wanting to see them, and their parents were home and they were having dinner, and he came back again. So, and that's all documented that he was going. I guess he was going around. He had been at a friend's house earlier. They were listening to music and probably doing something else. And
he's a good-looking dude, so you'd expect that from a young boy, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's exactly what you'd expect from a young boy. 16, I mean, my boys, and I'm thinking about me too, you know what I mean? That's where we'd have been at. If we weren't on the park shooting ball or doing something, then we'd be knocking at some young lady's house and making ourselves known to their mother that we're good.
Yeah, so all the witnesses that testified that he was in the neighborhood, one of them said, he had asked them to go knock on a girl's door and see if she would come out. And so that's how they established that he was in the neighborhood through those witnesses. So
I want to just go back to one of the things that was raised in this, which was that another burglary was done in that area.
Yes.
Right, and the person that they believed to have committed this, or the description that was given, was totally different to matching Jonathan, right?
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
There was a police report that somebody in the neighborhood had said there was some person going around ringing doorbells, and then there was also another police report where a person said that they had noticed that there was another burglary, and the police investigated that burglary. We didn't get a whole lot of information from that, other than that they found 2 champagne bottles in the snow. So something else was going on. And also, at that same house where this incident 3 weeks earlier, somebody had burglarized that house and had taken watches and some other things, and a small amount of coins, some money. And so there were fingerprints in that burglary, and it always, even to this day, is why didn't they take those fingerprints from the first one and compare them to the fingerprints of the second one?
Was that never done?
I have never seen any documentation where that was done. So if it was done, it probably concluded that it wasn't the person that's in prison right now. And maybe that's why I never have been able to figure out why it was not done.
So far we're hearing some really compelling facts that would support an appeal. Is there a case for an appeal going forward for Jonathan?
Yes, we are deep into a continual investigation, and we're moving in that direction, definitely. So,
I mean, what is the process for an appeal, your side, state side, especially because I know it differs from state to state, right?
yeah, it does. And in America, there's this whole thing of finality that you know, and you've probably read it in a lot of articles where people, it's easier to put people in prison than it is to get them out.
Yeah.
And and that's because once they feel like they've made the decision, they don't want to go back and reverse that decision. And sometimes it can be some very compelling evidence, um, but it's almost people don't want to listen. They want to. It's done. It's checked off my list. Let's move on. So
Jonathan's been in prison for over 20 years now.
yes,
So what's prison life been like for him? Because that's going to be a hard thing. If you know you're innocent, is there a time where you give up hope, or you feel like you're just condemned to that sentence? Is he still optimistic?
he's very optimistic. You know, man. The thing I like about Jonathan is, we all have our struggles outside, and I know when I'm down, just going to visit him, because we have made a commitment to visit him every weekend, and we've been visiting him every weekend for the last 11 years, unless we're on vacation. So he's got an extremely, considering everything that he's gone through, optimistic and positive attitude, and he's not just sitting around. He constantly works on his case. He's constantly reading. I paid to have him get his paralegal degree, and he went through that program, through correspondence. That's the only way he could do it, and he graduated at the top of the. I mean, he was getting all A's on every test that he was taking. So he's an extremely bright young man. I think nobody probably saw the potential when he was 15 and 16, but if you were to speak to him now, and if you were to talk to him now, you would. Extremely intelligent young man. He didn't go in there in prison and just fall into prison life. He immediately got his GED, and then he started fighting for his life, at the early age of 17, 18, and 19. So he's been fighting for his life ever since he's been in there. And filing his own pro se appeals and everything, because he didn't have lawyers at the time.
So again, if he was a gangbanger, killer, murderer, wannabe, you'd have expected him to formulate his relationships with gangs and gang members, etc., when he got to jail.
Exactly.
But he seems to be focused on education and bettering himself and doing something productive and positive, even though he's convinced of his innocence.
Right.
And
he's always.
Go on.
I was going to say that they do have a kind of some prison industries in there, so he's always worked. He translated Braille books for a while. I know he's had other jobs while he's been there. They don't get paid very much, but Jonathan's not an idle person. They had a raising dog program. He was involved in that. Currently, they have a program where they can garden, so he loves to be outside, so he's involved in that. So he's always been involved. And he's a sports guy, so he plays basketball all the time. He's always doing something. He's not sitting idle by and just wasting his time in there. He's trying to better himself, read, especially studying the law. He's always in the law library all the time. So
you and your wife refer to the fact that you're doing this in ministry, and you do this as a blessing, and God has spoken to you both. Has Jonathan got any spirituality going on about him?
Oh yes. I think that's the connection with my father-in-law, because he was in church at the time that they met, and he was in the choir, and he's definitely rooted in spirituality, and that's the connection that we had with him, because when we came in, God I believe it was totally a God thing that we met, because it's not something that I ever sought out to do in my life.
Oh,
And now I've been involved in it for 11 years. So,
the thing is, we know, because we get discernment and the spirit of discernment. So, but we know that people often think of God-fearing people as easy pushovers. Tell them a sob story, man, and they'll go to war for you.
right.
And I've often encountered people who think that they can do that, but see through it quite quickly. You can see that there's actually no commitment for them to change or transform. They're still, they're coming to you saying one thing, but their behavior, their conduct is saying something else. So I suppose what I'm trying to ask here is, has Jonathan's conduct been that of a man who's pursuing God, apart from what he represents to yourself?
Yes, I mean, and despite how hard prison life is, because you can be walking on water and still get accused, and even in the 11 years that I have, they can white shirt you or put you in the hole for whatever reason they had. I know he at one time helped another young man whose family is actually pretty famous here in the United States, by just calling her mother, and that just the fact that he used the phone to call that person's mother to let her know that he was in the hole, put him in the hole. So you're in the most adverse situation when you're in prison. The rules that a fairness that we expect out here outside of those walls is not the same rules that are in there, because in there everybody's guilty. There is no hierarchy or of good or bad in there in the eyes of guards and the administration. So
And I suppose that's the difficult thing when you're trying to keep yourself on the straight and narrow and all chaos is going on around you. It's not easy in a place like prison, penitentiary, when you're incarcerated, to stay straight when people are trying to make things difficult for you. Has he had any problems with the officers?
He's pretty friendly with most of them, but you can always have one that doesn't like you, and you can always have other inmates that try to mess around, mess you up.
Because here's the thing, a guy that is gang banging, or a guy that is a mind of criminal intent, doesn't forge relationships or friendships with police officers or screws, as we refer to them here, in prison guards, etc., because they're the enemy. So this fact that he gets on well with them stands out well for him, right? And
Oh yeah.
it says something about him, his integrity, his mentality, his attitude, his character, is what it speaks of. That even in the midst of all of this trial and intense persecution, that even those that would stand guard over him, he can still have respect and a love for, right?
Yeah. I know in the beginning, our relationship, people questioned that. They thought, and I can tell you this, but we went to church with a person that was a guard there, and they were wondering why were we, coming to visit him all the time, because they always think something is going on. And I wouldn't have never thought of that, but I thought, I guess, they're always thinking the bad side of everybody that comes to visit, or the inmates. And stuff does happen in prison. I know prison is not utopia. So
what sort of hope does your investigators give you based on the information? Because when you look at these quick facts that I have here in front of me, they all speak a story of innocence, but yet he was still found guilty.
And it's interesting when you say that. It just makes you cringe that you can have evidence that says the opposite, but in this world you can still be found guilty. And Jonathan is not an isolated case. I'm over this 11 years, we've met tremendous other people who are fighting for their family too. We met I don't know if you heard about Ryan Ferguson. He's also a person that was in Missouri. His case got national attention where he ended up being put in prison for 40 years because the other person had a dream, and the dream was that they both committed this murder, and there was no evidence at all. Now he's out now, and I know his father, publicity-wise, over the world knew about Ryan's case. It was on our national news. It was everything, especially when he got out. And I'm friends with them, and they have, just like you, they've looked through this and they know that the facts tell the truth that Jonathan shouldn't be in there. So.
He's a personal trainer, and he spent 10 years in jail, Ryan Ferguson, right?
Yes. He did.
And the thing is that there is absolutely a lot of we do a lot of shows on wrongful convictions, and there are many sites that I am attached to about wrongful convictions, the guilty and the innocent, stop convicting the innocent, and stuff like that. But before you got involved with Jonathan, what was your impression of law and order based on your upbringing?
Well, even when I was in college, I had a little incident when I was in college where I had a bad experience with police, but I have friends that are police, so I've never really had a bad feeling about them. I haven't had any really bad experiences other than something that happened in college where, they were looking for somebody and they just looked at me as being a black person and just decided that that they wanted to question me for whatever reason. But I didn't have a bad thought about it, but most of us get so busy living our day-to-day lives, I probably just didn't think about it until meeting Jonathan. Jonathan, especially after we had 3 boys, he opened my eyes, and my boys are really close to him. We've adopted him as just part of our family, and so the boys, they go to visit him, and I really wanted him to mentor them about just being boys and being all the different influences that are outside in society, and so he's helped with all 3 of them. So
I've interviewed many individuals either about wrongful conviction and police brutality, where people have been attacked by police officers, injured, hurt, and again, for us, we don't normally deal with cases where we're talking about people that are perpetrators of crime, that have got a history of being known to the police as gangbangers or robbers or any of the sorts. Nearly all of the cases that we deal with are people that are having a first-time experience, and it's changing their opinions because prior to that encounter, as a people, I know we as a people, our ethnicity, our culture, our environment has taught us to grow up respecting authority, respecting our elders, and doing the right thing. We haven't always followed that, but there's always been that reverence for authority. But my mother was another one for that. But I found out there's a woman that I interviewed last year or the year before, Antoinette Houston. I don't know if you've heard about her, but she was attacked by a police officer with her child in the car, having stopped off at a Walmart to pick up a donut in an empty car park, and she was attacked because her car was slightly across one line that didn't matter because there was no other cars in the car park that she was obstructing. But they ripped out all of her shoulders. Now, this is a woman that dated police officers, and she said specifically, quote unquote, up until her encounter, she didn't know anybody that had bad experiences. It wasn't part of her environment. She was a teacher. So most of the people that she had around her were good people, and she'd even dated police officers. So she wasn't aware of this police brutality and Black Lives Matter. She'd heard about it, but to her it can't be true. These people must be making this stuff up. Were you like that? Was you in that kind of, or were you already sold that anything is possible as far as law and order is concerned?
Well, until I had the experience in college, I I probably was like that a little bit. You know, I mean, I'd hear things from my friends, but, and I'll tell you the incident. I have gone to work. I lived in an apartment, came back to my apartment. Apparently, there was a cleaners close to my apartment that got robbed, and I was asleep because I had to study for a test, and I get a bang on my door. And when I get up, I'm in my boxers. I'm going to the door. I said, "Who is it?" They said, "Police." I immediately thought it was my friends playing around because, you know, they would do that. And so they're banging on the door, and they said, "Police." I'm not gonna open my door because I'm in my boxers, and I'm saying, you know, if you're all the police, quit playing around. I mean, is this really the police? And then I kind of thought, well, maybe I need to open up the door and just see who it is. So I cracked the door, and the police, and it was two police officers, two white police officers. And I said, "Can I help you?" In doing like what my mother would say, be respectful. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was for me to shut the F up and answer the questions, but they didn't ask me any questions. So at that point, I was definitely fearful because I got two people with guns and I'm in boxes. And the young guy was just, he was just cursing me out. And I was nervous and scared. I didn't know what to do. And then the older guy finally, you know, calmed the young guy down and then kind of told me what was going on. And I just told him, I said, "I just got off work, just woke up from you all banging on the door." And I think he realized, you know, that I wasn't a suspect, and then they just left. But I called my mother right afterwards and told her what happened, and she said, "Did you get his badge number?" I'm like, "I was too scared, Mom." they had guns.
Here's the thing. Nowadays, they don't back up even if they make a mistake now. You know, you're quite fortunate that they backed off, because nowadays they come to your door, gun in hand, and they're more likely to shoot first and ask questions later.
You know, I thought about it in light of everything that's going on in the United States, that it could have happened, and there would have been no witnesses because there was nobody. It was a small, older building apartment, and I was the only one in that apartment at that time. So
let's go back to talking more about Jonathan, because I want to hear some more about Jonathan. So how has Jonathan been talking up about his case or his prospects? What does he have to say about all of this?
He's such a determined young man, and he knows he's innocent, and he's going to fight to the end to make sure that he gets in a position to get out. And we're supporting him 100%. And so we've got some things going on. We've got some people who are backing us up, and we've got a lot more traction right now than we've had earlier on in the years. You know, we've always been working on this. We've had different lawyers over the years, different situations that have changed over time. But I think I believe, especially with a lot of things going on, even like this program here, that, you know, we're getting the word out. We're you know, people are understanding and seeing his case, and I think that does help. I think even with Ryan Ferguson's case, I think the more people knew how bad it was, I think the more it helps the public to know that, you know, just because we go on with our daily lives, this stuff really does happen. So,
are you getting local press attention or TV? Are you getting anything out there?
I think we're getting some. I mean, you're the second radio station that I've been able to talk about it. We've had an event here in St. Louis that we've gotten some support from, and we're connected with some people that have some more national support that are supporting what we're doing right now, and that's a really good thing. So
that's what I was going to ask you next. So have you aligned yourself with some of the more national organizations, like the Innocence Project?
Yeah, we've connected with the Innocence Project. You know, right now we have actually gotten money to hire a personal attorney because we have some specific things that we want to move forward with. You know, I just spoke with a really good guy that we might bring on as an investigator, and so we've got some things some irons in the fire right now. So,
for me, without sort of like trying to. I don't know how to put it, but I'm reading this, and if I was Jonathan's father, for example, I'd be at my wit's end. I'd be pulling my hair out, trying to work out why it's taking 20 years to get him some real attention, to get him out of jail, to get him a retrial, a trial, an opportunity to rehear his case. Why do you think it's taking so long? Because this, if you was to just hand this sheet of paper to somebody, they'd say, well, why is this guy in jail?
That's the same thing I've been saying. Why does it take so long? But I've learned over the 11 years that our court system, there needs to be a lot of things done, to me personally. And so I like the fact that we're doing this, because I think the public needs to be aware that we need to be involved in our local politics. We need to know the law. We need to, with the internet, it really helps you now. I can read the statutes. I can get on there and find them. I don't have to go down and ask for them. And I think that allows us to know what's really going on. And when we see something wrong, we got to speak up about it. We got to vote, vote with our money, vote with our votes, and make sure we're putting the right people in, and then hold them accountable, because there's no perfect people in the world, but we still got to hold them accountable, because they have a jurisdiction over our lives, and we need to make sure that they're doing the right things. So
you can't look at a case like this, bearing in mind what St. Louis, Missouri would have been like back in 1997, and not look at the politics that went on in those particular areas at that time, can you?
No. And my biggest thing, and this is my platform that I told Jonathan, it's interesting to me that the prosecutor is a public servant, but they bring politics in it. They're voted in. I mean, they get elected. But then the public defender, who's a public servant too, is appointed. And that in and of itself is a bad thing. I don't think you should bring politics when we're talking about people's cases and laws, because people do a whole lot of different things because of politics.
And I suppose that's, again, we say this so often on this show, the difference between the Crown prosecution here in the UK and the judicial system out there in the States is that they're a law unto themselves out there, whereas the Crown prosecution are still accountable to the state. I mean, out where you are, the district attorney determines who gets a deal and who doesn't get a deal. The district attorney decides what goes to trial and what doesn't go to trial.
Exactly.
The district attorney decides if there's a plea bargain or there's no plea bargain. And it really depends on who the district attorney is as to what the outcome is going to be on any given arrest or trial.
And they are voted into their positions. And that, to me, is where I think it's wrong. There needs to be some kind of oversight and accountability to all of those positions. And when people do things wrong, instead of saying it's a harmless error, it needs to be investigated, because I don't think there is such thing as a harmless error when somebody sits in prison for 20 plus years because you decided to not follow your own rules. So.
But on top of that, even when the district attorneys have been found to convict somebody who was absolutely not innocent, not guilty, there's still no accountability. There's still no consequence.
No, and they won't back. I've noticed that they don't want to back down from any of that. Even if they know they're wrong, they don't want to admit they're wrong.
So from a political point of view, because unfortunately we've got to look at the politics, because you can't not look at a case like this and not see the politics in it. The battle has to also be, as well as fighting for his freedom, the battle also has to be about reform.
Yes.
You know?
You're totally correct, Kervin.
So are you guys, or the people involved with you, connected to you, are they looking at battling the reform of the judicial system?
I think that's the bigger picture of it. Our main focus is to get Jonathan out, but I don't believe that we're going to just sit idly by after the celebration of him out and not still speak against making sure this doesn't happen to another Jonathan.
Because here's the thing. You've got involved in this out of a personal relationship that your father-in-law was having with Jonathan. You've been well committed to him for the 11 years that you've gone and visited him every weekend. But I'm quite sure that since you've been visiting him every weekend for the last 11 years, you've now got to hear from him more and more stories of individuals that are going in there, being incarcerated, sentenced, convicted for crimes that nobody believes that they did.
Exactly.
And they're all facing similar circumstances as Jonathan.
Exactly.
So
I just saw something on YouTube today where a young man in Kansas City got out, and his photo lineup was very similar to Jonathan's, where they had highlighted his picture, and that's how he ended up in prison for, I think he was 17 years, and he just got out. So Jonathan's not an isolated case. I think he does have a unique case, but it's not an isolated case. So.
Oh, by far. You've only got to go on to wrongly convicted, and you'll see a plethora of released individuals. But here's the thing for me, right? And this is what I really, really struggle with, right? People are convicted for crimes that most people don't believe that they have committed. But not just in Jonathan's case. In almost every case that I've come across, it's after they've served 20 or 30 or 40 years. They've been exonerated and released. Their lives have been a total mess. They've missed out on their childhood, and their children's lives. They've missed out on weddings and births and all sorts of stuff. You can't give that back to an individual.
No, you can't.
So, why? Never mind just Jonathan's case. Why do you think it takes so long to get a wrongly convicted case back to retrial? Is it just the sheer? I mean, I'm probably answering my own questions here. Is it the sheer opposition of the district attorney?
Yeah, I think it's almost, to me, it's the arrogancy of the system, is that when we make a decision, our decisions are right and final, and we don't want to change them. And instead of being honest and saying, hey, we need to, for the greater good of all society, we need to make sure we're making the right decisions. There's something that I did hear about in California, I don't know if you've heard, where they have an oversight committee that now looks at cases. These are not part of the judicial, I mean, they might be lawyers, but they might be retired lawyers. Well, they'll actually just look at cases and look through them and then make recommendations. And I think there should be that kind of oversight in every jurisdiction.
Oh, absolutely.
It should be some citizens, some potential jurors should sit through it, because they're the ones because a lot of the stuff that jurors hear, they don't know. There's certain things that they didn't hear because something was stricken out. And had they heard that, they might have made a better decision. So it's just, to me, there's got to be a lot more oversight over the jurors, over that part of the society. So
there's an accountability issue in all of this, because with the district attorneys having as much control and power as they do, they're almost unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a committee that oversaw every case, so for example, here we have what's called a Crown Prosecution Service. So the police arrest you, they charge you, right? They bail you, or they remand you in custody, and then they send a file to the Crown Prosecution Service, and the Crown Prosecution Service decides on whether there's enough evidence to go ahead with the trial. That's before a prosecutor is attached to a case. And these are recommendations that have been put in place based on some of the past experiences that we had here in the UK, where people, because we used to have the death penalty here back up until the 60s, etc. And the last person that was hung to death was found to be innocent 30 years after they hung him. And back in the 70s and the 80s, we had extreme cases of miscarriages of justice, and in particular, I'm not sure if you heard about, because I mean there's a lot of terrorism going about now, but back then we were we were involved in a lot of terrorism with the IRA, the Irish, here in the UK. And people were just being interned in prison just for belonging to the political wing of what was referred to back then as the IRA, and being attached to particular crimes, terrorist acts, where there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever. We had the Guildford 4, the Birmingham 6, to mention just a few, who were all exonerated and released shortly after trial. So systems were put in place to make sure that there was no repeat of this. And what we struggle here with in the UK is the amount of mistakes that are made out there in the United States, of wrongful convictions, and people being sent to death row, who obviously there's not enough evidence to have taken them to trial, let alone convict. Why is nothing being done to put something in place that stops that, prevents that from happening again?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. But I think things like what you're doing is bringing attention to this, so the public knows, not just in the United States but all around the world, that these are not isolated incidents. These are things that are happening, and just getting us aware of it, because I was not aware of all this, really. I went on with my day-to-day life, raising my boys and everything, until I met Jonathan. Now, what I do know, I definitely want to speak about. So,
here's the thing: we started this particular show about 3 years ago, and when I started it, I didn't actually have an idea of a direction that I wanted to go in. It was meant to be about different things taking place all over the world, and I had my first police brutality show with a guy called Alex Salazar, and Alex Salazar was a police officer in the LAPD at the time of the Rodney King beating. His father was a racist police officer before him, and he was part of that institutionalized racism himself. But after Rodney King's beating and what was being asked of him to lie about, he had a rude awakening, and he resigned, and now fights the good fight. We did our first show with him about 3 years ago, and little did I know that 3 years later, I'd still be each week, more or less, revisiting another similar case, scenario. If it ain't police brutality, it's unlawful killing. If it's not unlawful killing, it's wrongful conviction. But this just goes on and on and on, and it's endless. It's absolutely endless. And the amount of innocent people that are caught up in this, the domino effect to the family members that are associated with them. And one of the biggest things that I've found in all of this that ties it all together is the amount of faith-led support that goes to the victims of these unlawful killings, these wrongful convictions. There's a lot of folk, and I suppose you could turn around and say, well, that's God's calling on our life. But there seems to be a lot of people of faith attached to these individuals that are all being treated wrongly. And I can't help but wonder if this is not just part of the greater plan that the enemy has to cause havoc in the kingdom of God.
Well, we must be on the same page, because, and I talk to people about that, especially if you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, the most egregious wrongful conviction that I've ever known was Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Even when Pilate said, I don't have anything against him, the politics of the time forced them to make a decision to put him to death.
Yeah.
And it's that death that we all have life today, and life more abundantly. And so I do think there is a spiritual connection to all this that's going on. And I think, like you said, that faith-based people are there. We totally understand how people can be wrongly convicted. It's just helping the whole world understand that there is a spiritual warfare that goes on. And we got to open our eyes to what that is and do all that we can to stop that from happening. So,
see, because here's the thing. While we continue to fight the battles as the world fights, we actually have no chance of winning, because this is a spiritual battle.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual battle. And for me, I think part of the problem that we have in the world today is the dissection of churches across the world, how separated they are from one another, rather than the unity, because God says where there's the unity, He commands His blessing. So I think as faith-led people, we've got to start uniting with our other churches in order to fight this fight, right across states and borderlines, and putting our differences to one side, because for me it's the propaganda that keeps us apart and allows them to continue to rule over us.
Right.
You know,
When you can divide people, you can conquer them. When people come together, and we are to be together in one faith, one God. Yeah, we shouldn't be divided like that.
So here's the thing: this very day, I've just registered as a member of the UK Christian Party, and I had to go and Google it because we've just had our elections here in the UK, and I voted Labour. They didn't win; the Conservatives did. But I didn't want to vote any of them, to be honest with you, because none of them are really presenting godly principles. But I'll tell you the one film that really, and I know it's a funny film, but it makes sense to me, is Brewster's Millions. Do you remember Brewster's Millions with Richard Pryor, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I think to myself, right, he started that campaign for vote for none of the above, right? And he used all of his money to lead this campaign of vote for none of the above. And the greatest irony was that everybody voted for none of the above. So my question has to be, while we out in America, you had the choice of Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And for the life of me, I could never understand how you managed to be left with those two as your only two options. You had a racist crook and a racist, right? You were giving your soul to the devil, whichever one you picked. You know, you actually didn't have a winner there. But if every Christian had put their differences to one side and found somebody with a Christian organization that wanted to stand up, it doesn't matter how much money you had. If every Christian had voted for a Christian leader, neither one of them would have been in power.
You're right.
But you had Christians voting for Donald Trump, and you had Christians voting for Hillary Clinton. So yeah, we're fighting each other.
Yeah.
So surely the battle starts on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
And when we start fighting the battle from a spiritual level, we have a better chance of winning.
And you're right. I mean, you know the scripture that says the battle is not against flesh and blood.
Absolutely.
But spiritual wickedness in high places. So.
And yet we continue to use the platform to fight each other. And even in the arena that we're fighting in, we're actually fighting some of our fellow brothers and sisters of Christ.
Yeah.
You know? So what plans do you guys have taking this forward in order to help Jonathan receive his innocence?
Well, some of the things that you guys, I mean, just the awareness part is huge for us right now. I mean, you know, just like you said, when you looked at it, wow, you know, you saw right away. And a lot of these things, the more attention we can get to what happened, I think the more people's awareness and their eyes are open, just like mine were. And that's going to help us become united and get together and make some changes that are going to help everybody. So.
And I suppose social media has become a tremendous help for us now, because now we've actually got somewhere where we're not governed by who says we can put what where. We actually have the freedom to put our own stuff up, right?
Yes, for sure.
So
I even think the connection we have with you, that just came from, you know, here you are all the way over in London and we are all the way over in America. And how would we have ever met had it not been all the technology that's available to us right now?
And that's one of the biggest problems that you actually find, is that most of the news, most of this stuff, we don't get to hear about on our news. I only get to see this stuff on social media. So unless you've got people like me, you, and others like us who continue to regurgitate this stuff through social media, it just doesn't get out there, does it?
That's true. That's true.
So do you want to? You have a website for Jonathan?
Yeah, we do have a website. It's www.freejonathanirons.com. But you can go there and get all the facts on his case and read it yourself. And we're just, we're connecting with people like you, Kervin, and others. Has been really just helpful, and it's been helpful to Jonathan because it encourages him that that there's other people listening to his story. Before, I think for the 11 years that we've been, it was kind of like a personal story. My personal friends knew about it, my family knew about it, but now we have the opportunity of letting other people know about it.
Earlier in the show, you said that you had 3 kids. Are these 3 kids biological kids that you had with your wife?
Yeah, my oldest one is adopted, but the other 2, God blessed us. We have a story ourselves. We went through 7 miscarriages thinking we would never have kids. And I think that's why we have such a passionate heart for children and others. And so then we adopted, and then God, blessed my wife, and we have 2 biological boys too. So.
And how do your children react to all of this attention focused on Jonathan?
That Jonathan's their big brother. I mean, they go see him on their own when they can, because they're 2 of them are in college now. The oldest one works, but he's just part of the family. It's just like an extra brother. So yeah, they talk to him on the phone. He encourages them. And I think that helps him because he knows he has a family to have when he gets out. So, yeah.
So I was going right there, Reggie. I was going right there. So let's just say that Jonathan gets released on his appeal. Is he coming home with you?
Well, he's coming home with us.
Another adopted member of the family.
He's been adopted for 11 years.
Yeah. So he's coming home. That's his home. And does he know that? Is he aware of that? Is he?
Oh, he's totally aware of it.
Wow. It's an amazing work that you guys have done. And again, you've done it all through the grace of God and through the ministry. Now, just a couple of questions before, because we're coming really close to the end of the show now. So your father-in-law is in ministry. So that's how she started, I would imagine, her journey through faith. Did you have members of your family that were in ministry also?
No, I don't have anybody in my family from ministry, but, we are a faith-based family, And so, my parents know, my siblings know about Jonathan. So, my dad, having served the United States of America in the Army, we talk all the time. So we talk about everything. He gives me the history of my family and all the injustices that happened before me. So I know everything about my family. I know everything that happened to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and it just fuels me to make sure that we're all moving forward to make things better for everybody. So.
And again, that's what family is, because family was God's idea, right? Created by God, and that's what we were meant to be. People talk about biological, but it's not just about biological. We're brothers and sisters in Christ from.
That's exactly right.
And so therefore, that's how we should be treating each other, like brothers and sisters all the way down. So what's next for you and Sherilyn, Reggie? You guys got anything planned? Any protests? Any stuff planned to move forward with?
Oh, we're always looking for opportunities to get the word out. We're focusing on some. We just had a meeting with Jonathan's lawyer yesterday, and we've got some things that we're focusing on right now, and we're going to keep everybody informed as things progress too. So I'm glad I got to meet you, and I know you, and I got your phone number. So I would definitely be letting you know what's going on. So,
well, we're going to need to keep that real, but again. I suppose it's been a great, entertaining almost hour and 3/4. Is there anything else that you want to add? Before the close of the show, is there anything else that you want to say? Is there anything that you think that we might have missed?
Nothing I can think of now. I just, and I'm doing this out of, not that I'm just trying to promote your show, but I'm doing this because I think what you're doing is a service to a lot of people. And I know there's like these little fine lines of connections because, we just met not too long ago, but I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate with what people like you are doing. It helps support what some of us are doing, and just getting that word out and getting that awareness out, I think is going to help tremendously in the future. So,
well, look, Reggie, I know you guys are busy. You got a lot of things up. I just want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to share Jonathan's story. And it's not always that we get an opportunity to share people who are faith-based, because it allows me to open up even more about why I do what I do, because I believe it's a calling from God that allows me to open up this window of opportunity for people to be able to share a story of persecuted injustices that allows people to hear how other people are being treated around the world. We deal with a lot of cases of all different types, but it's my calling. It's what God has called me to do, and I love doing it. And I just thank you and your wife for giving us an opportunity to share Jonathan's story. The website, I believe, is www.freejonathanirons.com. And is there any other? Is there a Facebook page, Justice for Jonathan?
Yeah, Justice for Jonathan. If you go out there and like that, we'll keep everybody updated as his case progresses,
and on top of that,
we'll make sure you get a personal call though.
Oh, absolutely. You just keep me in tune and focused on anything that's going on and anything else that we can do to support or help in any way. Please don't hesitate to contact us.
All right.
Reggie, Thank you very much for your time, and we just look forward to speaking again.
Have a blessed day, Kervin.
And you too, my friend. God bless.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Wow, that was an amazing encounter. Fantastic story. First of all, with Sherilyn Williams, and then the rest of the time you heard as me and Reggie kind of went down to it. That's the story of Jonathan Irons, wrongly convicted, spending 20 years of a 50-year sentence, incarcerated for a crime he didn't commit. We'll make all the information available to you on World Jam, www.worldjamglobalradio.com. You can also find it on Issues Today. Don't forget, it's www.jonathanirons.com. That's the website. Or you can go to the Facebook page, which is Justice for Jonathan. And this information is readily available. My name is Kervin Julien. I've been guest with Sherilyn and Reggie Williams. This is Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. We're out of here.
The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man, don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison. Prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. time. I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time, already did my time. I paid for my crime, already did my time.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in...
Don't forget you can catch me tomorrow morning again for the Wake Up Everybody Sunday Gospel Show. We'll be back next week with Mark Clements.
Trying to cope with this living hell. Trying to cope with this living hell. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Trying to cope with this living hell. This living hell. This living hell. This living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Pay for my crime. All those drive-by killings, stop them.
We're going to be back next week. We're going to say with Mark Clements and abolishment of the death penalty will be the theme.
Cast the first stone. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. And put down those knives, stop stabbing each other. Yeah.